Stop!
In the name of motion?
Close enough. First guest episode. Yay!
Yay!
Turn up your lights!
And prep your cameras for...
Lights, camera, chatter! Hello and welcome to Lights, Camera, Chatter, where we pause, rewind, and play our way through our favorite cinematic beats. We're your hosts, Noah Gorman
and Laurel,
couple of teachers from Southeast Michigan.
This episode is particularly fun as it's our first guest episode!
Woo!
Joining us live in the studio are my brother Zelith and his fiancée, Órlaith. Go ahead and say hi.
Hi! Stop motion is always an incredible effect. Turns out great. And it's very high effort. It's one of the more difficult jobs in the film industry, at least to someone like me and Laurel who are not in the film industry.
I mean, it's no wonder these movies are often made with the help from titans in the effects industry because of how, difficult it is to film stop motion.
And with Zell and Órlaith here, we thought it'd be fun to run down and chat about some of our favorite stop motion films. Spoiler alert, because we will be talking about things that happen later in the films. For the following 8 movies: Nightmare Before Christmas, Coraline, Chicken Run, Mad God, The Corpse Bride, Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, and Shawn the Sheep.
Let's get to it.
All right. With this being our first guest episode, I wanted to get things kicked off with some of the favorite stop motion films of our guests. Zelith, you wanted to talk about The Nightmare Before Christmas, the film famously people think is directed by Tim Burton, but is actually produced by him. Why don't you give us a little more about that?
So this is one of my favorite movies, and honestly, one of the most impressive things that I've found is how many clay faces they use just for Jack Skellington alone, which is over hundreds. The rest of it is puppets, which I found really interesting, that they were able to make the effects they did, especially when he goes from the pumpkin head and jumps into the acid and turns into Jack Skellington. All of that is puppetry and using the different expressions on the faces to make that happen. I've always found it's a favorite movie because it feels more fluid than you would think stop motion is. It took them, I think 3.5 years-ish to make that movie. And that's insane for me. There's so many frames and so much effort was put into that movie, and we have a bunch of Tim Burton movies on here that will also be talked about.
Yeah, it was dope.
It's a great movie, and I think my favorite fact about this movie is while Chris Sarandon voiced Jack speaking, not his singing.
Yeah,
his singing was voiced by the same person who wrote the music for the film, Danny Elfman, which, by the way, for those in the audience who don't know, Danny Elfman did the music for a lot of Tim Burton films and was also in his own band called Oingo Boingo at one point. We're going to talk about him in another episode. Probably not anytime soon to give a break from all the Tim Burton you're about to hear about today. But he's great. And again, he sang for Jack Skellington, which is awesome.
The stop motion film Coraline was based off of the 2002 book Coraline, written by Neil Gaiman. They actually ended up having, it was a little over 240 different faces that they made for Coraline by herself. They had all of her outfits individually made, and the effects are really impressive with how they came out in the movie and how they made them. And I think it's a marvel for stop motion animation in general. So it ended up being my favorite movie because of that.
Yeah.
I like the stop motion cat.
I like the scene where she goes through the tiny door, and
tiny door.
It's basically like one of those kids' tubes.
Yeah, that was a clever visual that they didn't really mention in the book. And I want to say also, the only complaint I have about this movie is they could have gone further with the other mother's design. If you read the description of the book, she's significantly creepier in the book somehow.
Oh yeah, definitely.
They could have gone a step further.
She's already creepy enough.
I really
Well, we
like.
could make it another step and just finally agree that it's not a children's film.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like there's already agreeances and disagreeances on whether it's a children's film.
True.
Yeah.
Not to mention a star-studded cast on the voice acting front: Dakota Fanning, Terry Hatcher, Jennifer Saunders, Ian McShane, and Keith David as a cat, which is a sentence I never thought I would say out loud, and I honestly didn't know it was him until I did the research for the episode
Honestly,
this morning.
I really like the tulip scenes and how
The
different it
tulips.
is between the first time the tulip garden is introduced and the second time after they find out that the other family is evil.
I mean, yeah, we could go on for a while about the imagery in this movie and the way parallels and opposites are used.
That
Juxtaposition,
cat
that's what I'm
has
looking
friends
for.
on the other side. The other mother's side.
Laurel, I swear to God. I swear to Mad God.
No.
Which is a movie we will talk about later in this podcast episode.
Next up is one of my favorite childhood stop motion ever, Chicken Run, and I mean the OG. Apparently,
There's a posable skeleton that sits on my desk, and Laurel just knocked it over
the-
because she got too excited.
the skeleton didn't quite make it out of the pencil case, but it is a kind of an word. I'm sorry. Anyway, I'm talking about the OG, not the sequel. Apparently, there's a sequel, Chicken Run: Dawn of the Nugget. It's Nugget. But anyways, I want to see that one at some point. Haven't seen it yet. Anyways, Chicken Run. It's basically the great chicken escape. And their goal is to escape from the evil Mrs. Tweety, who originally slaughtered them, but then started turning them into chicken pies for some reason, because it probably made more money. Anyway, thanks to the help of a rooster, they did finally escape and make it to paradise. Hurrahski.
This, yeah, I mean, I'll be upfront. This is a movie I haven't seen since, like, 1st or 2nd grade. I remember liking it. I have never watched it since. I did not know Mel Gibson was in this movie.
I really like
He
the
voiced Rocky, apparently.
I really like the scenes where they have mud because they really like
Oh, the mud scenes are good.
yeah, they really just like animation wise, stop motion animation wise, it was just a very like it felt
and
like it was an actual like
Remember the
Hold on.
oven scenes?
Going forwards, anytime we say the word animate or animation, we are referring to stop motion. There. That's what I said.
okay.
Remember the oven scenes?
Yeah.
Where they have to. Oh, that was so cool.
I really like where they show the manufacturing inside the pie making device because they go in to try and stop it and you can see all the gears turning and everything as well.
I did forget to mention, when they were making this film, it was literally about approximately 1 minute of film per week, and each beak had a different sound. Like, there was a chicken in there with an accent. I forget their name. Was it like, what is their name? Anyways, like, they had to, like, record a lot of their, like, beak movements separately because of their accent. And that's true of any of the chickens that have an accent. It was really, really awesome.
Real quick before I talk about the next movie, we looked it up off mic real quick, and the chicken that Zell and Laurel were talking about is named Mac, right?
Mac and cheesy. It's just Mac.
Tonius Macaronius. Anyways, I am going to preface this by saying the film I am about to talk about is not a family-friendly movie. We are a family-friendly podcast, and so I will limit my language, but I'm clarifying the movie itself is incredible, but most definitely not for kids, and harkens back to a conversation we've had multiple times already about not all animation is kids' movies. That said, I would love to call attention to Phil Tippett's 2021 film Mad God. Phil Tippett started out as an effects artist doing effects on films like the Jurassic Park movies, the original Star Wars trilogy, RoboCop, and the original Starship Troopers. He also apparently directed one of the sequels. But he's been doing Mad God as a side project, and it took him just over 30 years. A lot of time and effort went into this film, and the crew was incredibly small, with Tippett himself doing a lot of the work in the movie. Now, talking about the movie itself, calling it weird would be a gross understatement. I made the other 3 folks on the podcast today watch this last night. Laurel had already seen it, but Zelith and Órlaith had not. It is the worst fever dream you've ever had as the most beautiful movie you've ever seen. The animation's incredible. I'm seeing nods in the room behind me right now. The plot, if you haven't seen it before, you're going to think there's no plot. I'll say that straight up. But it's about cyclical nature of humanity. It takes place after nuclear fallout. There's this main character who never once talks called the Assassin, where he takes a dive bell down into literal hell. It only gets stranger from there with these Cronenberg-esque monsters, again, all made out of clay and metal because they're stop motion puppets. Completely decimating everything. There's this demon computer that talks like baby babble. There's one human character who they just call the last man throughout the film. And then, again, spoilers, as we said throughout, there's a point where the assassin gets cut open, and there's this chest burster looking slug they pull out of his chest.
Like Alien.
And then they crush the chest burster into space dust, blow it into the atmosphere, and then the Big Bang happens. And when this happens, there's still like 10 minutes of movie left. It's a great movie. It's a very strange movie. It was produced partially by the streaming service Shudder, which for those who don't know is an all horror and dark comedy centric streaming service. If you like horror, highly recommend. Not sponsored. I'm just a fan. It was great. It was weird. But it was great.
Strange. Yeah.
It was very detailed, like the metal pieces and the different like slimy effects were really well done.
It probably had some of the best perspectives I had ever seen in animation.
I really like the camera angles really that they used, because it just wasn't just straightforward on the assassin at all times. Like, you would see him walking across and there would be like bigger objects in perspective.
Yeah, Tippett, I mean, with his effects experience, especially in a movie like Jurassic Park, I'm not surprised that he has that ability to create such a sense of scale.
Yeah, and some of the like foreshadowing of some of the like elements in the movie itself, like when the little the poop people are being rolled
We're not going to
over.
explain that context at all, just poop people.
When they're being rolled over, you see like some of their corpses already on those steamrollers, so you know they're gonna get run over.
Yeah.
Also, if you
Like,
look,
little
the
details like
poop
that.
people are made entirely of wire and yarn. If you look
Yeah.
closely when you watch the movie. Again, sentences that only make sense if you have seen
Which is so weird because like
the movie.
they did a really good job with making it look like it was like kind of muddy.
Great movie. Absolutely recommend, unless you're a child and you are listening to this podcast, in which case,
Be careful.
wait till you're at least 72.
What? 72.
I'm going to be doing Corpse Bride as well, which is another Tim Burton movie. Corpse Bride is the third stop motion feature film produced by Burton. He is actually the one who directed this movie.
Yay, finally a Tim Burton directed film.
Exactly. This took 10 years to make, 55 weeks to film from everything I looked up. Over 300 puppets, each with a gear mechanism for controlling the doll's mouth, jaw, and eyebrows with a ton of frames. This movie is just visually gorgeous. Like we had already said, there are spoilers in here, so my favorite scene is the very last scene, visually at least, which is her basically turning into a bunch of, I would say, butterflies,
Yeah, they were
particularly.
like blue butterflies.
Yeah, I don't know if they're classified as moths or butterflies, but I'm pretty sure it was butterflies. And they basically all turn and float away, and visually it's just gorgeous. And the fact that all of that is stop motion is very impressive. There are also a lot of other great scenes in this film which show just amazing stop motion scenes, which include a ton of the music scenes, which involve so much
that
different
piano
movement.
duet.
The piano bit is so
yes.
good.
I do wonder if the butterfly moth thing was ambiguous on purpose, because many people associate butterflies with life and moths with death.
Yeah, that's...
I find it a possibility, though we don't know for certain, that it was intentionally ambiguous.
I think with the piano duet, I think they actually do hit the keys that are being played, if I remember right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've seen
someone
that.
broke down that scene.
I know
Props to the person that broke that down.
Because I'm pretty sure it was all the instruments in there as well. Because there was a trumpet scene with the skeleton as
Oh,
well.
you're right.
Where he did actually play notes. I just don't know if they were 100% accurate.
Someone did a breakdown.
Someone somewhere over the rainbow did a breakdown.
Next up is Marcel the Shell. So cute.
I love this
movie. Originally was some short films made on a budget that were turned into a movie, and that movie took 7 years to make. Unfortunately, during filming, Dean Fleischer Camp and Jenny Slate, who producer and the voice actor for Marcel, ended up splitting. They divorced, but they had such a good working relationship that they still finished the movie and probably work together still to this day. Someone will have to verify that one.
The special features on the disc imply that they still work together, but the disc, the A24 special edition that we have, was released in 2022, so that could have changed in the past 2 years plus 3 days into 2025.
Possibly. But anyways, it's a journey of a shell making their way in our real world. So stop motion Marcel with real world humans interviewing them.
Fleischer Camp plays the human character who interviews Marcel. Dean and Slate voices Marcel, which is probably one of the reasons they were able to still work through this. I find it really interesting because this isn't a stop motion world. This is stop motion characters in our world.
Yeah.
Like there's a whole Ploppy in the film. There's a whole like Twitter campaign to help find Marcel's family from Dean and his in-universe ex-girlfriend who split up, and so Marcel got separated from the rest of her family. And it's a really cute movie. Marcel lives with her grandmother, Connie, and somehow they made a shell out of stop motion into a sweet old lady, because effects artists are magicians, and you cannot convince me otherwise.
Go ahead, Zoe.
My favorite scene is where Marcel, she has a Tootsie Roll wrapper as a parachute and just floats down. And it just shows like a real life item with a stop motion character, and it's kind of silly and fun.
Whimsical. I like that. That's a good word for the film. It's whimsical.
Whimsical.
I mean, Marcel is tiny.
It's just so tiny.
I reiterate, whimsical.
With
Well, of
such
course she's tiny.
items.
She's a seashell.
I mean,
with legs.
Yeah.
There's a couple scenes where they have candles and they're just birthday candles, and I love that they use that as a comparison because candles would just be too big.
They use it as like for those listening who haven't seen, they use it as like a light candle rather than a birthday candle, in the same way we would use like an oil lamp as people.
It reminds me kind of Ariadne.
Ooh, that's a good comparison. We just talked about that in the last episode of the podcast. I would like to talk about Pinocchio. Now, those in our audience are probably going, what? And the people who are going, what? Have not seen Guillermo del Toro's 2022 adaptation of Pinocchio. This is not your grandfather's Pinocchio by any mean. It's not Disney. It is self-produced by Del Toro, like the vast majority of his films. It's based on the same source material. It is a much darker take. These are, again, spoilers ahead, some real plot beats of the film, including this Pinocchio straight up cannot die, and so he gets drafted into the Italian army during what is implicated to be World War II. He runs off to the circus at one point and gets kidnapped by a ringmaster of sorts, and then he convinces a semi-talking monkey to help him escape. And then at one point, he loses his gift and straight up dies. And also the spirit of death, who we see several times embodied as a sphinx with a female voice, which was a choice that they made. And because we started acknowledging in last episode, this is on hashtag the list of movies that made Laurel cry. To their credit, though, it also made me cry. So I'll cut
At
this space
first,
out.
you see this like young Pinocchio talking back, fighting back with
Sticks, literally.
Yeah, and Geppetto. And then as we go on, he kind of ages mentally and not in the way that he's like this kid anymore. He kind of grew up because of all the terrible traumatic things he was exposed to when being drafted into the circus in the war.
I really think it's I would say a really interesting and great choice that they made him look so childlike in a way when they made his figure, just to show that, like, technically he is a child, but yet all these things still happen, and then he matures mentally, but really does his appearance change physically?
I
also?
like also that they chose to leave him still looking very much like Wood.
Yes.
For those who haven't seen the Disney adaptation, when he turns into a real boy, he looks like a doll-shaped human child. In this Pinocchio, he still looks like a wooden doll. Aside from the insanely ridiculous plot beat of Pinocchio gets drafted into World War II, which will never not be funny, as messed up as it may be, it's a good movie. It took Del Toro about 2.5 years to make it, which is more than anything else probably just a testament to how experienced and well done he is in the field as a director and filling other positions and being able to work with cast and crew. It tells me that he had a vision beforehand, before he went into this, in a way that really benefited the project. Again, another one that I really recommend watching. I first saw this in 2023, and I did not have Pinocchio Goes to War on my 2023 bingo card.
I also really liked how they depicted the actual spirit of death as something else other than a Reaper-like structure with stop motion, which I thought was impressive just during this film and all, and the foreshadowing, obviously.
Talking about Shawn the Sheep, the movie. Originally based on the show that I believe went on for 2 or 3 years, originally from Britain, and they decided to make a movie that got 99% on Rotten Tomatoes, which I find hilarious, considering it's just about a sheep that left his farm because he got bored of farm life. So the premise of the movie is like I said, a sheep wants to escape their farm and accidentally knocks out the farm keeper, and he gets amnesia and spends half the film trying to figure out who he is and thinks he's a hairdresser. And the main antagonist of the film is animal control, which they later changed to animal protection after he gets launched into a one. I don't remember where he ended up landing, but it was somewhere random.
The Void.
The Void.
Now, for the viewers who are confused why I said that, I have not seen this movie, so I have nothing useful to contribute right now.
They literally go to Metropolis and try to get him back because he lost his memory.
Yeah.
So they go back to the city.
Yeah.
I do like the stop motion of Shaun the Sheep, especially in the show as well, because it really translates that to that movie as well. There also is a secondary movie where they're abducted by aliens, which is the one that I've seen, and that one's Farmageddon. That one was really silly, and I like the way that they used stop motion to make it gave that whimsical, mystical feeling as well when you watch this one, as well as being just overly silly.
And thus more evidence that, just like animation, stop motion can run the gamut. I would argue that there's probably a higher percentage of kids' movies within stop motion specifically, because a lot of concepts that are considered mature, such as grotesquity, like in Mad God, are just harder to accomplish in the stop motion field. And that's perfectly okay. If you like it, watch it. Seriously.
Thanks for joining us today on Lights, Camera, Chatter, especially to our guests Zell and Órlaith. Any final words, anyone?
I'm not quite sure if this counts the moral of the story, but give stop motion the respect it deserves. Just go watch it. I don't care if you're 80. Go watch a children's movie. It will be fun. You will have a whimsical experience. Anyways, sorry, I had to get on my soapbox there real quick. Until next time, this has been Lights, Camera, Chatter.